Hi, Dave here. I'm back, and I'm here to talk about another piece of reloading. And I'm not sure how much this series is going to continue, but this is kind of a part that felt was pretty important. And this is regarding cleaning your brass. Now, there are many different methods on how to do this using different types of media, different types of cleaners. There's Everybody kind of has their own spin on how to do this, including myself. Now, I personally have tried two different ones, and I'm going to list a few of them here. But the first one I tried it because it was inexpensive, was the water method, and not the wet method that I'm going to get in later. This was an inexpensive. I've got a airtight container, and I'm going to put it with this much water. And essentially, I found this online as an option, and it works. Essentially, what you do is you take some hot water. Would say about a half gallon with the size container I had. And then you mix in your salt. The hot water is so the salt will dissolve. And then the salt kind of dissolves some of the residue stuck in the brass. And yes, salt is corrosive. So you want to be cautious with this. And I'll get into that in a minute too. But the salt you dissolve in there. And with about a half gallon, I was doing about a tablespoon of salt. And this was just standard table salt, the iodized table salt. And then you mix in your vinegar. I was putting in about a half a cup of vinegar, which, yes, it does dilute it. You do not want full strength vinegar on your brass, from what I'm told. And I would also put in 2 tablespoons of dish soap. And this kind of helps clean and shine up the brass as well. Now, once I got that mixed into the water, I would then add the brass to it, and then you close the lid tight, you give it a really good shake, and this allowed you to kind of agitate and kind of oscillate everything around in there, and it would start the mixture of breaking down the residues and all that still in the brass. Now, with this method, it's a matter of agitating it, it'll foam up in there. You let it sit for a minute so it can kind of settle, and it'll do some of its work, and then you agitate it some more. And it's basically a matter of going through and doing this for about an hour. And then after that, you want to basically pour out the water, not lose any of your brass. And then rinse it really, really well. Because you have salt in there, you have vinegar in there, you want to make sure you get all of that out. Now, the detergent, I've heard, can react to the smokeless powders and black powders and stuff. So you want to make sure you get all of it out of there. No residue whatsoever. You want to make sure when you're rinsing this off, you're rinsing it off with the hot or cold water. Doesn't matter to me. I used hot water. And you want to make sure you're getting all of it off. No residue whatsoever. Then you have to make sure you dry it exceptionally well, because when you're reloading, you can't have that moisture in there. So what I would normally do, and I had bought a salad spinner for this, I thought it was an excellent idea, and it worked really well, is I had a removable basket salad spinner. I would put all of the brass, I would pour the brass through the basket so it was a strainer. And then I would rinse it off real good. I would dunk it in water and rinse it out real good, make sure everything ran clear out of there. And then once that was clean, the brass was rinsed off really well, I would then put it in the salad spinner, give it a good spin, and basically turning it back and forth a couple times to get the droplets that were stuck inside to come shooting out. And I would usually end up with quite a bit of water at the bottom of the salad spinner. And then after all that, and I lived in Arizona at the time, I would pour it out on a towel in front of a fan and just let it air dry. Now, I have heard of people putting it on trays and throwing it in the oven on low heat, and that would bring up the temperature and allow the water to evaporate faster. I haven't tried it. In Arizona, we didn't really need to. It was quite dry there, so things tended to dry very quickly. So that's one method. It did work. I did have problems getting the drying process down correct. I did have a problem at one point getting the residue off enough. If you don't, I'm trying to find a piece of brass that I found earlier. If you don't, I'll get a picture of this and I'll put it in up here. But if you don't, you end up with this haze on the brass. Also, you end up with I would say corrosion, and it's like a greenish corrosion from the solvents. And it will cause your primers to not fit in properly in the pocket. It could actually react with the powder, and it can weaken the shells. So you want to be really careful on how you do this. The next method is also a wet method, and I haven't tried this one. This is one that I have seen online. I've seen a lot of people talk about, and they say they really like it. And basically, it is you take what is a rock polisher. I believe they sell them specifically for this, but it's basically a rock polisher. It's a watertight canister filled with steel pins. You could probably use ceramic balls or ceramic pins, but I've heard those are harder to get out. And then what you do is you fill it with water. You put in a case shine solution. I've also heard people using the water method that I had mentioned earlier, or even just dish soap. And essentially, you turn this thing on and you let it run for about 45 minutes to an hour. And all the pins move through, and they actually clean out your brass, and it polishes it up really good, and it makes it very shiny. But once again, you have to make sure that you're rinsing off your brass really well, and you're also making sure that you're drying your brass very well. So there is a method to that. There is a secondary process that you have to go through with that. And the method, from what I'm told, seems to work. I've not tried it. But there is some outlay. You do have to buy your pins or your ceramics, and you do have to buy the tumbler, or not tumbler, the rock polisher, or wet tumbler as they're called. But from what I'm told, with the steel rods, you can use a magnet and they'll pull those out, and then just leaves your brass. You still have to inspect them. Always remember to inspect your brass. But as far as that's concerned, it is, from what I understand, it's a very good method. There's another method that I used, and really more out of convenience. I used what is known as a case tumbler. And I have mine right here, and it is a dry method. And this one's actually a pretty large one. They sell larger. They also have smaller ones. This is about average. But essentially, you see there's dust in there. The dust is from the media. Now, the media can be a number of things. I mentioned steel rods. I have heard of people using that in these. I feel like that would be very damaging to the tumbler. It would also, I think, because of the weight of it, compared to the hardness compared to brass, and the fact that this is all just very heavy in this tumbler being shaken, it's basically vibrating the media with the brass in the tumbler. I feel like that would actually damage the brass. I don't know. I haven't tried it. You also have the ceramic balls, which are available. Those are a bit more expensive, but I hear they work very well. I just actually read about rice, using dry rice as a media, and that's actually kind of interesting. It seems kind of wasteful because you're wasting food. Um, it seems wasteful to me. However, that method, once the rice was used, it would be biodegradable. So I guess you could bury it and it would be absorbed back into the earth. I don't know if it's good for the earth, but for the most part, you could. Then there's the two methods that I originally heard of. One is actually using corn husks, which is the leftover byproduct of corn. Also used for tamales, another great use for them. But corn husks are reasonable. You can usually get the media already broken up from a reloading supplier. They also sell walnut shells. Walnut shells are actually very interesting because walnut shells are used as a pet litter as well. And the reason why I used walnut shells out of all these other options is because there was a ranch store near where I lived in Arizona. And the walnut shells at the time in the reloading suppliers was about $15 for about 5 pounds of media. I was able to get 5 pounds of media, which is a lot of media, of the walnut shell for about $5 from the farm store. And it worked out because I had all this extra media. I was able to use it for cleaning, for the shining part of it, for the polishing part as well. So I had two different ones. I would have one that I would use for cleaning, and then once that was done, I would bury it because it was biodegradable. And then I would use what I had last used for polishing as my cleaning from then on because it was not clean enough to polish with anymore. So it was kind of a rotation. And I also used some of it for my shooting rest because it, instead of sand, it was lighter. It actually held its position better. It held the shooting rests very well. It was very good for that. So one other side effect from getting it from the farm store, ranch store, because it was used for a pet, there was a lot less dust in it from the get-go. And you can see in this, the dust residue in this is just, I'll put this down. If you hear this, I apologize. The dust residue is pretty brutal. Try to show you that. I don't know if you'll see it, but that's the residue I just wiped off. And when you're tumbling, after you get done tumbling, the vibrations have this dust floating around in the air in there. And once you open it, it goes everywhere. So with the stuff you get from the reloader, you're going to get this dust. Now, the polishing stuff, not so much because you add the polishing cream and that kind of keeps it down some. The cleaning method, you're going to have not just the dust from the walnut shells, but you're also going to have the dust mixed with the chemicals that are coming off and the residues coming off the shells. So when you do this, you're going to have that. However, as long as you're cautious, and honestly, you probably want to use at least a mask to block it from going into your mouth. You end up with some pretty clean brass. Now, the side effect of this, or the downside is, you still need to inspect your brass because the media is small enough where it can actually get down inside the pocket, down inside there. It gets down into the primer pocket, and more than once I have set off a primer because I did not look and before I tried to push a primer into the pocket, and there was a piece of media stuck in there. Now, it doesn't happen that often, hopefully. When a primer does go off and you don't have hearing protection on, it is excessively loud. But those are the methods I know about. I know that the tumbler methods, both wet and dry, work very well. The inexpensive method can work. The brass does not end up being as shiny and bright. But if that doesn't matter to you, if you're just taking it out to plink, then honestly, does it matter? In my opinion, if it's just plinking, no. But I do like the dry method because I can set it in there, set it off, go and do other things, and it's out in the garage or out on the patio making its noise out there and cleaning my brass for me. Then all I have to do is strain it out, get all the media out of it, collect my media, and I can put it back in to shine it with some clean media and some polish, or I can take it as it is and reload it. I have used polish on it before and have cleaned it or made it shiny. I don't always do that because it really isn't that important. And all of these methods will work with both the nickel plate and the copper. Steel, I have never tried these with. I don't think it's worth doing it with steel. I'm told you can reload steel. I just don't know if it's worth doing it because you risk damaging some of your equipment. But that's my information that I have on this. Hopefully it will help somebody out there that isn't sure what they want to do. There are positives and negatives to each one. You kind of have to pick your poison and go with it. I would suggest trying the inexpensive method if you're really not 100% sure you're going to be reloading. That way you don't have all this money invested into it. But that's the information I have for you. If you found this helpful, please go ahead and share this video out. Share like my channel, or like the video. Subscribe to my channel if you enjoy the content. And this is Dave. We'll see you next time.